Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for tuning in to another segment in the Boss Lee Cafe. Today, I'll bring you another video touching on this whole indictment from the non-Trey Bloods in Charlotte, North Carolina, that actually captured Magoo, also known as Pedro Gutierrez and Inferno, who was allegedly the Godfather GF leader of the non-Trey Bloods up and down the East Coast. It was also reported in court documents that he was a chairman and held a chairman's seat under the UBN, which was a regulated council, the United Blood Nation, which brought all the different hoods of, different sections of blood under one banner. It's known to some, a lot of people who know him personally, that Magoo, Pedro Gutierrez, was actually a former Latin king. He was a Latin king who, had some trials and tribulations within his faction of the gang, or whatever the case may be. Because back in that time, if I'm not mistaken, there was a lot of inner turmoil within the Latin kings, and it had led to him catching a murder, which is why he was convicted. Now, while he was incarcerated, he wound up switching and turning to blood. Now, rumor has it that even though he was a former Latin king, he was really known for putting in a lot of work. Like, he let his gun fly. He put in a lot of work. In gang's terms, that's basically saying like he cut and stabbed a lot of people in furtherance of the unit, and eventually, after making a general position of 101, he makes his way up the ranks, and eventually becomes the forefather or poster child, head figure, reportedly according to court documents, for the UBN. Now, the reason why he's so important, and I had to, give you a basic introduction of who he is and his position amongst the family, is because when this indictment dropped, it was said that he was one of the main promoters that were trying to say Uno B was a rat. So now that we're getting to the paperwork and looking through the court transcripts and official documents, we just learned that even though Magoo, who was the Godfather, didn't actually write any incriminating statements when they were arrested by the police, he didn't actually, testify and say anyone did anything, but he did have incriminating testimonies that he gave to the gang intelligence officer while he was incarcerated in the state facility. That was ultimately used in their trial, and they were convicted due to those statements. Okay, it starts here on page 12 of 204, and the transcripts for the jury proceedings for Pedro Gutierrez. All right. It says, good morning. Would you please introduce yourself to the jury and spell your name for the court reporter? My name is Captain Colin Frazier. Captain Colin Frazier, where do you work? I work for the New York State Department of Corrections. How long have you worked there? Approximately 18 years. Now, ladies and gentlemen, before I keep reading, this is the testimony of the gang intelligence officer who was interviewed in the federal trial of, in regards to the debriefing or information given by Mr. Gutierrez. It says, approximately 18 years. What are your responsibilities? What's your job title? First of all, currently I'm a captain. Currently I'm assigned to the command center in Albany, New York. And what type of responsibilities do you have as a captain at the command center in Albany? I oversee all 54 facilities in New York State and Division of Parole. All incidents occur in the facilities, and within position of parole, I'm who they report to. Okay. Do part of your responsibilities include monitoring gang activity within the facilities? All incidents, which include everything, gangs, stabbings, slashings, drugs, sure, everything. And what was your position in October 2015 through February 2016? I was a corrections sergeant assigned to Great Meadow. Great Meadow. 10, 12. Great Meadow Correctional Facility. What were your responsibilities in that role? I had several responsibilities. One of them being I was a relief sergeant at that time, so I would work throughout the facility. But I was also tasked with monitoring gang activity and drug activity in the facility. Was one of my additional assignments. As part of your duties back in 2015, 2016, did you have the opportunity to have conversations or interviews with any of the defendants who are here today? Yes, I did. And who was that? Mr. Gutierrez. Would you please identify as Mr. Gutierrez by an article of clothing and describe where he's sitting? Mr. Gutierrez has glasses on, gray shirt maybe, and a tie. And where is he seated? He's all the way to the left by the door. Ms. Lippman, let the record reflect that the witness has identified defendant Gutierrez. So reflected. Sir, let's back up a little bit. How did it occur that you came into contact with defendant Gutierrez? Mr. Gutierrez was transferred to my facility from Allberg Correctional Facility. It was an administrative transfer. I don't always know the reason for an administrative transfer. He arrived in Great Meadow from serving a SHU sanction, special housing sanction, and then was released to our general population. And why were you assigned to speak to defendant Gutierrez? Because of his position within the Bloods gang warranted a face-to-face interview. And how many times would you say you formally interviewed defendant Gutierrez? 3 times. And did you speak with him on other occasions as well? Sure I did. If we passed each other in the hallway, perhaps he was in the mess hall or in the yard, certainly. And were those formal interviews, were they in October 2015, January 2016, and February 2016? He said, certainly. I generated memos regarding those interviews. After your first interview with him, why did you interview him again? At his personal request. Okay. Did defendant Gutierrez tell you he was affiliated with any gang at the time you talked to him? Yes. I mean, we had lengthy conversations about his gang affiliation. And which gang was that? 14, 15. The 9 Trey, which is a set of the bloodish gangs. The United Blood Nation, the United Blood Nation. And he told you that he was a member of the United Blood Nation? Yes. How did did he tell you when he was brought home? Yes, he did. Or joined the Bloods? Yes, he did. And when was that? In Bagoon. I'd have the exact date. I'd have to get my notes. I have to see my memo. I believe it was March of '94. But again, I'd have to review my memo. Did he tell you who brought him home? Yes, he did. And who was that? SI. Did he tell you how he started with the UBN? Kind of what his role was in the beginning? Yes, ma'am. We had that discussion about how he became affiliated, where his actual gang life, for the lack of a better term, initiated from the streets in his neighborhood. The block started out with the TFP, or the Trigger Finger Posse, which was just local kids committing small minor crimes, if you will. As they grew, the crimes grew, and they started to be filtered into New York City correctional facilities, which are obviously separate from New York State facilities. And sir, did he tell you what his current position as of when you spoke with him October 2015, January 2016, and February 2016? Did he tell you what his current position was at that time? He said he's the chairman of the UBN. The chairman of what? Of the UBN Council. How did he get that question? Did he tell you? He worked his way up. How did he get that position? Did he tell you? He worked his way up. And what does that mean? When gang members, when they put in work, when they establish themselves as loyal gang members, they have to put in work. Work could be anything from committing a stabbing, slashing, assault, physical assault, hands, using only their hands. It could be selling drugs. It varies. What, if anything, did he say to you about whether anyone was above him in a gang? During one of our conversations, he indicated he answers to no one. At any point, did you ask him whether he would leave the... If he would leave the Bloods. We had a lengthy conversation. What did he say about when you asked him whether he would ever leave the organization? Again, I'd have to see my memo to be specific, but to summarize, he was inside the wall. The gang needs him. He needs the gang. He has a lot of memories, a lot of ties, obviously, with the gang members over the years. And in a nutshell, he wasn't willing to sever those ties, which was required for part of what our conversation was about at the time. Okay, did he talk about other Bloods in the gang at all? The Blood gang membership generally to you? I'm sorry. Did he talk about, I guess, how many members of the Bloods were under him? He indicated he had thousands of members up and down the East Coast. I mean, did he know every one of them? No. Hold on a second, John. All right. He indicated he had thousands of members up and down the East Coast. I mean, did he know every one of them? No. Okay, did he explain to you how he governed such an organization from prison? He talked about that. I did ask him, how do you do that from your special housing cell? He had indicated he utilized the tools that are available to him, whether it be the phone system, the mails, visits, passing information along during a visit. Sure. At any point, sir, did you talk about any kind of other organization that was kind of similar or had some, hey, get out. At any point, sir, did you talk about any kind of other organization that was kind of similar or had some analogous ties to the Bloods organization? Did you bring anything up in that regard? Certainly. What I was trying to do was understand the enormity of what we were talking about. And the language that I used was my own assignment for my service days here at Fort Bragg over in Fayetteville. I tried to understand the enormity. So I said, look, when I was in the military, I was assigned to Fort Bragg, North Carolina, and I worked for a 3-star general who was in charge of the corps. Now the corps general was in charge of several installations up and down the East Coast. 1st, 82nd, 3rd ID, so on and so forth. And those are governed by 2-star generals. And we broke it down he broke it down to me as the local private E1 working for that 3-star. So though I never met the 3-star general, I still performed my duties to the best of my abilities so that I wouldn't disappoint. I asked Mr. Gutierrez if this was similar in structure. Was he capable? Was he comparable to this 3-star general who was in charge of how many ever thousands of people up and down the East Coast? He agreed that it was similar. And he actually said to you that he thought the other Blood members, some of whom he had never met, would perform their duties for fear of disappointing him. Is that right? Certainly. Captain Frazier, did you and Defendant Gutierrez discuss the death of Tisa Kelly? Yes, we did. Did you have the occasion to ask him who was responsible, if he knew who was responsible? Yes, I did. And did you understand him to know who was responsible? Absolutely, he knew. What did he say about the person who was responsible? I asked him for the name. I asked Mr. Gutierrez for the name. He was reluctant to give me the name. He knew exactly what I would do. I would list them as in anticipation of the perpetrator of Tisa Kelly. He knew I would list them as separate T's, not allowing them to ever come together. Why would you list them as separate T's and never allow them to come together? What does that mean, first of all? Well, separate T's meaning that they are combatant and potentially combatant. It means if someone is in one facility and there's a separate T, you can't put the person in the same facility. Correct. They'll never be in the same facility. Certainly mistakes happen, but why would you do that with a person who Defendant Gutierrez knew had murdered Tisa Kelly? To protect both of them. Why is that? To protect the perp of Tisa Kelly's homicide as well as Mr. Gutierrez from doing something foolish. By something foolish, what do you mean? Committing, as a retaliation, commit the homicide himself. Did he mention, for anybody who's lost, this is about an individual who's this man is still in protective custody to today behind the statements that Mr. Gutierrez made to this gang intelligence officer. But I'm going to continue. Did he mention anything else about this person, whether you were able to find out who it was and list that person as a separatee or not? Did he say what would happen to that person? He indicated that it didn't matter whether I find out the perp's name or not. He was not going to be allowed to live in New York, in the New York State penal system. And what did you take that to mean? Based on, my own experience, that indicates no matter where this guy puts his feet, what facility in New York State, he's going to be cut, he's going to be stabbed. He's not going to be allowed to live. He's not going to be able to be in population. He's not going to be able to be, that's jail slang, if you will, that they use. Did you understand that to mean that defendant Gutierrez would have other people cut, stabbed, not allow this person to live? Absolutely. I'm certain there is a TOS, what the inmates call terminate on site, hit on site, order for this person specifically. I'm certain that is there. Captain Frazier, did you speak with the defendant Gutierrez about someone named Big Iz? We did. And about the Miller Bloods, I believe. Is that right? Yes, we did. Can you explain what that conversation was about? Big Iz is an inmate named, like you want the government name? I could go with that. Sure. Big Iz is Lester Jones. Okay, Lester Jones is the OG godfather of the Millertown Bloods, the Miller Bloods. There is a conflict between defendant Gutierrez and Lester Jones. That conflict stems from the divide of the UBN or the Blood Nation in the early 2000s. Lester Jones was assaulted in Auburn, and the belief was that the assault was given, or the order to assault Lester Jones was given by Pedro Gutierrez. And what kind of assault was this? It was a cutting, a slashing. What, if anything, did defendant Gutierrez say about this? About there possibly be a war with the Miller Bloods. What would that entail? If all the Millers and all the UBN, to include the 9 Treys, if they all went together, that would be a significant event throughout all 54 of our facilities, in addition to what could occur in the streets, certainly. And when you say what could occur in the streets, did defendant Gutierrez tell you that such a war would affect the streets? Yes, he indicated it would affect the gang members in the streets. And what did you understand that to mean? It would affect them in the streets. They all have to go. If one goes to war, they all go to war. It's that simple. And what would that war entail? It could be anything. Stabbing, slashing, gunfights. Nobody, as soon as you know that goes back to the terminate on site, the TOS. As soon as perhaps a 9 Trey were to see a Miller Blood, you got to shoot him. It's just that simple. Do you understand that to mean, that could mean to be murder on the streets as well? Certainly, it could be murders in jail. Oh, I need something to drink, man. Excuse me. Murders in jail. Captain Frazier, did you ask defendant Gutierrez about the funding of the Bloods organization? Yes. What was your sense? I'm stuffing the top. Captain Frazier, did you ask defendant Gutierrez about the funding of the Bloods organization? Yo, get out. Get out. Out. Get out. Captain Frazier, did you understand defendant Gutierrez about the funding of the Bloods? Did you ask defendant Gutierrez about the funding of the Bloods organization? Yes. What was your sense of whether he knew? What was your sense of whether he knew that people were committing crimes to fund the UBN? Objection, Your Honor. Basis as to my client's thoughts. The court. Well, he can repeat any admissions by your client. So, to the extent that he's repeating what he was told, the objection is overruled. If you're just speculating, then you can't testify. So, do you understand? No, sir. So, I guess the court. If you have personal knowledge and you were told by the defendant, you can answer the question. If you're just guessing as to what his thoughts were, then you can't guess. The witness, okay, the question one more time. Sir, I asked, what was your sense of whether defendant Gutierrez knew that people under him were committing crimes to fund the United Blood Nation? He did not indicate. We did not have that discussion. Okay, let me ask it this way. What did he say to you about steering the United Blood Nation going forward? We had a conversation in the context. I asked about the funding. How do you fund this? These thousands of people up and down the north of the East Coast. I said solely through prostitution, drugs, things of that nature. He said his response was he was moving. His interest was in moving the gang away from those things as to more of a community outreach program. So, sir, was your understanding from his statements that he knew that things like prostitution and drugs were happening in this gang? Objection, Your Honor. He's already answered it. His understanding, Your Honor. The court, I don't think objection overruled. I don't think he's quite answered this specific question. So you're asking if it's my assessment based on that conversation that he understood the people underneath him were doing these things. Is that correct? Yes, sir. That's what I'm asking. Yeah, it is in my opinion based on his response. Objection, Your Honor. He can give a lay opinion, so objection overruled. As long as it doesn't turn into an expert opinion, a lay opinion based on conversations he's had, Ms. Littman, no, Your Honor. That's all we were asking. So you can answer the question. Well, I guess you did. Yes, sir. Sir, would you just repeat that since you were interrupted? Based on the conversations that we had and his response to my question, it is understanding that he understood how the gang was being funded and was looking to move it out away from that. So knowing that the gang was financed via drugs and prostitution. No further questions. Mr. Joseph. Mr. Joseph. This was cross-examining. You never talked to James Baxton, did you? Now, this is the attorney asking the gang intelligence officer, has he ever spoke to Frank White? You never talked to James Baxton, did you? I'm sorry, sir, I didn't hear you. You never talked to James Baxton, did you? No, sir, I never met Mr. Baxton. I don't have anything further. I don't have any further questions. Thank you, Mr. Wentz. Thank you, Your Honor. All right, so then it moves on to Mr. Wentz. Mr. Frazier, good morning, sir. All right. Well, there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. I've been working on this edit all night. You see the sun's coming up. About to get some rest. I'll be back with the next segment of this tomorrow. Salute.